He told her to wear something beautiful tonight. So she did. The crimson dress, the gold earrings. The hair pinned up the way he always said made her look like she owned every room she walked into. She had no idea he was counting on that. Julie James moved down that corridor with the quiet confidence of a woman who had earned everything she had: her startup, her vision, her future. The keycard felt cool and weightless in her fingers. Room 412 was just ahead. And behind her, the man she trusted most in this world was smiling. But his hands were already sliding a thick white envelope into his jacket. She didn't see it. Someone else did. At the far end of that hallway, half swallowed by the shadow of an open elevator, stood a man who had not moved a single muscle. Not his hands, tattooed, dark and intricate, holding the elevator doors apart like it cost him nothing. Not his jaw, not his eyes. Especially not his eyes. Because those eyes were already reading the entire scene the way a chess player reads a board 3 moves from checkmate. He was Tan Jun, and he had not come to this hotel tonight to rescue anyone. But what he was watching, a woman in red walking toward a door she should never open, guided there by a man already counting his payment, pulled something cold and deliberate to the surface of him. The men inside room 412 were his enemies. He had sworn, on blood that still hadn't dried, to dismantle everything they had built. He just hadn't planned on her being in the middle of it. Julie raised the keycard toward the lock. The elevator doors began to close, and Tan Jun stepped forward. What happens in the next few moments will show you exactly what it looks like when the most dangerous man in the city decides, quietly, deliberately, and without a single word of warning, that you are worth saving. Subscribe to see how this unfolds, and comment where you're watching from. I would love to say hello to you, just to know how far our story is going. The keycard beeped. One small, clean sound, green light, and the door to room 412 shifted just a fraction, the way all doors do in that half second before they fully open. That brief, irreversible moment where what's behind them is still unknown. She never got to find out. A hand came over hers, not rough, not panicked, deliberate. The way a man moves when he has already decided exactly what is going to happen next and has no interest in being argued with. The keycard was pulled away from the lock before her mind had even caught up to what was happening, and then she was moving, not by her own choice, her heels barely finding the carpet fast enough as the grip on her wrist steered her back down the hallway with calm, absolute authority. "What? Let go of me." She turned, and the word "stop" died somewhere between her throat and her lips. He was taller than he had looked from a distance. The charcoal suit, the black shirt open at the collar, the tattoos climbing his neck. All of it up close carried a weight that the hallway light hadn't fully prepared her for. But it was his face that silenced her. Not because it was threatening exactly, because it was utterly, unsettlingly calm. The eyes of a man who did not raise his voice because he had never needed to. "Walk," he said. One word, quiet as a closed door. She walked. Behind her, she heard Marcus, her boyfriend, her partner, the man whose name she had listed as her emergency contact, make a sound, half a word, something that might have been her name. She turned her head just enough to see him standing frozen in the middle of the corridor, his hand still hovering over the breast pocket of his jacket, his face draining of its colour with a speed that would have been almost fascinating if she hadn't been so confused, so disoriented, so completely unable to understand why the man beside her was looking back at Marcus with an expression that could only be described as a warning. Not a threat, a warning. There was a difference, and something in her gut understood it even when her mind didn't. The elevator doors opened. She was guided inside. She turned around just in time to see Marcus still standing there, motionless, watching the doors close between them with an expression she had never seen on his face before in 2 years. It looked like relief. The doors shut. The elevator moved upward. She yanked her wrist free and stepped back against the mirrored wall, putting as much space between herself and this stranger as the small cabin would allow. Her heart was slamming. Her hands were shaking, though she pressed them flat against her thighs so he wouldn't see it. "Who are you?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. She was quietly grateful for that. He didn't look at her immediately. He was watching the floor numbers climb with the same focus he had given the hallway, as though the elevator itself might require his attention. Someone who just kept you from walking into a room you wouldn't have walked out of. She stared at him. "That is not an answer." "No." He glanced at her then, briefly, the way you glance at something you have already fully assessed. "It's a fact." She opened her mouth, closed it, looked at the door, then back at him, then at the panel of buttons on the wall, and calculated, in approximately 3 seconds, that lunging for the emergency stop while alone in an elevator with this particular man was probably not her best strategic move. She stayed still. The elevator stopped at the top floor. The penthouse did not look like what she expected. She wasn't entirely sure what she had expected. Something cold, maybe. Sparse. Aggressively masculine in the way that powerful men sometimes decorated their spaces to remind visitors they were in the presence of power. Instead, it was quiet, ordered. Floor-to-ceiling windows ran the full length of one wall, the city stretching out below them in ribbons of light, and the room itself had the particular quality of a space that was lived in without being comfortable. Functional, secure, controlled. Every surface clean. A bank of monitors glowing soft and blue on a desk in the far corner, feeds cycling through camera angles she recognized. The hotel lobby, the restaurant, the 4th floor corridor. Her eyes stopped there. She crossed the room before she had made a conscious decision to do it, and stood in front of the monitor showing the 4th floor hallway, and watched. The timestamp in the corner read 40 minutes ago. The footage was crisp, high resolution, the kind of camera quality that did not belong to standard hotel security. And there was Marcus. She would know his walk anywhere, that particular relaxed swagger she had once found charming. Moving down the hall beside a man she didn't recognize. A wide man. Short hair. The deliberate, heavy-footed walk of someone accustomed to carrying weight in more ways than one. She watched the wide man hand Marcus an envelope, thick, sealed, handed over with the efficiency of a transaction, not a gift. She watched Marcus take it, watched his hand press it flat against his chest, watched him slide it into the inner pocket of his jacket, the same pocket, the same motion she had almost caught him making in the hallway an hour ago when she had turned around and he had smiled at her. And she had thought nothing of it, because she never thought anything of it, because she trusted him, because she was, apparently, catastrophically stupid. She wasn't aware that her hand had come up to her mouth until she felt it there. "The men inside room 412, the voice came from behind her, measured and even, "work for a syndicate that has been running illicit financial operations through this city for 3 years. Your boyfriend made contact with them 6 weeks ago." 6 weeks. She turned around slowly. He was standing several feet away, jacket still on, watching her with that same calibrated steadiness, giving her the information the way a surgeon delivers a diagnosis. Not unkindly, but without softening it into something it wasn't. "You've been watching him," she said. "I've been watching them." He walked into the frame. "And me?" Something shifted very slightly behind his eyes. "You walked in tonight." She turned back to the monitor. She didn't trust her face right now. She had always been better with screens than with people. Had always found data more honest, more reliable, more predictable than human beings. And right now, every human instinct she had was doing something loud and useless and painful in her chest, and she needed it to stop, because falling apart in front of a stranger was not something she was going to do. 6 weeks. She thought about 6 weeks ago. The dinner he had taken her to, the good restaurant, the one she had thought was a celebration of her funding round coming through. The weekend he had suggested in that careful, enthusiastic way that should have felt slightly off, but didn't, because she had been so deep in the launch preparation, so consumed by her work, that she had been grateful someone else was making plans. She had been grateful. She pressed her knuckles against her lips and breathed. Then she dropped her hand, straightened her spine, and turned around. "Tell me everything you know about them." He looked at her for a moment. Something that was almost, not quite, but almost approval moved across his expression. "Sit down," he said. She sat. His name was Tan June, and he told her only what she needed to know, which she recognized as a deliberate choice, and filed away accordingly. The syndicate was called the Voss Group, operating behind a cascade of shell companies and legitimate-looking corporate fronts. They had been expanding their financial infrastructure for the better part of a decade, and what they needed now, what they had apparently decided they needed badly enough to pay Marcus a sum she still couldn't fully process, was an encryption system sophisticated enough to make their transaction network invisible to any regulatory body on Earth. Her encryption system, the one she had spent 4 years building, the one her entire startup was built around, the one that was, as of tonight, apparently already promised to someone else. She was still turning that over in her mind, still feeling the particular nausea of having your life's work treated as a commodity by people who had never spent a single sleepless night earning it. When the first alarm sounded, not a fire alarm, something subtler, a short, sharp tone from the bank of monitors across the room, the kind of sound that cuts through everything because it is designed to. Tan June was on his feet before it had finished, moving to the desk with a speed and economy of motion that told her this was not unfamiliar to him. She was right behind him. The monitor showing the hotel's rear service entrance had changed. 3 figures, moving in the deliberate, low-profile way of people who knew where every camera was and had planned their route around the ones they could avoid. "They know I wasn't in the room," she said. "They know." He was already reaching for his phone. "How many men do you have in this building?" He glanced at her sideways, briefly. "Enough." "Where are their gaps?" She was already scanning the feeds, reading the camera angles, running the geometry of the building's coverage against the route the 3 figures were taking. "Here," she pointed. "They're avoiding the lobby cameras, but they don't know about the service corridor junction on 3. If someone reaches that junction before they do, I have a man on 2. That's too low. They'll have split by the time. Do you have access to the hotel's security grid? Not your cameras. The actual hotel system." He looked at her fully now, not sideways, not briefly. He turned and looked at her with the focused attention of someone recalibrating. "I have a terminal," he said, "but their system is locked." "Not for long." She was already pulling out her phone, already running through what she knew about the hotel's security infrastructure from the moment she had checked in, and her brain had done what it always did. Noticed, catalogued, mapped. She sat down at his desk without asking permission, and her fingers were moving before she had fully settled into the chair. "Give me 90 seconds. He said nothing. He watched. She gave herself 80. The hotel's security grid opened to her like a book left carelessly unlocked, and she moved through it with the particular efficiency of someone who had spent years building systems specifically designed to resist people who moved the way she was moving right now. She found the service corridor junction. She found the 3 feeds covering it. She found the electronic lock on the maintenance room door midway down that corridor, and she tripped it open. Then she found the fire door at the junction's far end, and she sealed it. And then, carefully, precisely, she rerouted the corridor's lighting circuit to kill every light on that stretch of hallway. 3 men, moving fast. Suddenly in the dark, one path sealed behind them, a locked room directly to their left. Tanjun's phone buzzed. He read the message, and the expression on his face when he looked up at her was not what she expected. It was not surprise, exactly. It was something more interesting than surprise, something that looked almost like being impressed and working to keep that impression from showing too clearly. "My man has them," he said. "I know." She stood up. Her hands had stopped shaking some time in the last 3 minutes, and she hadn't noticed until now. "They'll have a fourth, somewhere outside, watching the exits. You should move on him before he realizes the others aren't coming out." He stared at her for one more second. Then he lifted his phone and made a call, and she heard him give the instruction in Korean, precise and quiet. And then he ended the call and looked at her again. "Who are you?" he said. She recognized the echo of her own question from the elevator, and she allowed herself, for just a moment, the smallest edge of something that wasn't quite a smile. "Someone useful," she said. "It seems." They found the documents at 3 in the morning. She hadn't intended to go looking, hadn't planned to sit at that desk for another hour after the threat had been neutralized and the building secured. But the adrenaline had nowhere left to go, and her mind, once pointed in a direction, did not stop until it had reached the end of every available path. She had asked Tanjun's permission to access the encrypted files the Voss group had transmitted to the hotel's internal server in the 2 hours before Marcus had brought her here, using the hotel's own network as a dead drop like amateurs who assumed no one was watching. They had been watched. She opened the files. The first documents were financial, routing information, account structures, the kind of layered corporate origami she recognized from the darker corners of the tech industry, where people built things specifically to obscure what they were building. She moved through them quickly. Then she found the legal transfer documents. She read them once. Then she read them again, more slowly, her eyes moving over every line with the careful attention of someone hoping that a second reading will change what the first reading found. It didn't. Her signature was at the bottom of 4 separate documents that together constituted a complete and legally formatted transfer of her startup's core intellectual property. All of it, the encryption architecture, the source code, the pending patents, every piece of the 4 years she had poured into the work. To a shell company called Viridian Strategic Holdings, which she had never heard of in her life. Her signature, her name, her handwriting. Except she had never signed anything. She had never seen these documents. She had never, at any point in the existence of her company, agreed to transfer a single line of code to anyone. The forgery was excellent. She had to give them that. If she hadn't known, with the absolute cellular certainty of someone staring at their own name written by someone else's hand, she might have spent several minutes convincing herself it was real. She sat with that for a moment. The room was quiet around her. Somewhere behind her, she could hear Tanjun on the phone again, the low cadence of a conversation being conducted in a language she didn't speak, and she thought, distantly, about how strange it was to be here, in this room, at 3 in the morning, with this man, with the ruins of everything she had built laid out on a screen in front of her. She thought about what it had cost her, not the money. The money was significant, but recoverable. The time. The specific texture of those 4 years. The early mornings and the late nights, and the days she had worked until her eyes burned, because she believed, completely and without reservation, that what she was building was going to matter. She thought about sitting across from Marcus at that dinner 6 weeks ago, talking about the launch, full of the particular excitement of someone standing at the edge of something real, and he had sat there and nodded and asked the right questions, and the whole time. She closed the files. She stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the city for a long moment, and she let herself feel all of it, the grief, the humiliation, The particular fury of being used by someone you chose to trust. And then she set it down in a place inside herself where it would stop interfering with her thinking, and she turned around. Tan Jun had finished his call. He was watching her from across the room with that quiet, assessing steadiness that she was beginning to understand was simply how he moved through the world. "They forged my signature," she said. "Legal transfer documents. My entire IP portfolio moved to a shell company called Viridian Strategic Holdings. It's the Voss Group's." "Yes." She looked at him. "You already knew." "I knew they were targeting your company. I didn't have the documents confirmed until tonight." She absorbed this, filed it. "If those documents stand, my company is gone. The patents transfer is structured to trigger automatically at first business day, which is Monday. Today is Saturday." "I know." "That gives me 36 hours to make it irrelevant." He said nothing. "I can't do that by running." She said it clearly, deliberately, because she needed to hear herself say it out loud as much as she needed him to hear it. "If I run, those documents file, the transfer completes, and 4 years of my work becomes the property of a criminal syndicate that will use it to hide financial crimes for the next decade. Running is not an option." Tan Jun crossed his arms. He was watching her with that expression again, the calibrated one, the one that gave nothing away freely, but also didn't pretend to feel nothing. "What are you proposing?" he said. And there it was, the question she had been building toward from the moment she had turned away from the window. She had run the calculation in the few minutes she had given herself to look at the city, and the calculation was uncomfortable and complicated, and the only one that led anywhere she wanted to go. "You want the Voss Group destroyed," she said. "Not inconvenienced, not warned off, dismantled. Their operations, their network, their financial infrastructure, all of it gone." "Yes, I can help you do that." She held his gaze because this next part mattered, and she needed him to understand she was not speaking from desperation. She was speaking from a genuine, clear-eyed assessment of the situation. "I know their encryption architecture now. I've spent the last hour inside it. I know how they move money, where the nodes are, how their network is structured. I can build you a key to every locked door in their system. I can drain accounts, collapse shell companies, make every transaction they've made in the last 3 years visible to every regulatory body in the world. I can do to them financially what your men do physically." The room was very quiet. "In exchange," she continued, "I need your network, your intelligence, and your people on the ground to make sure that when I trigger that system, I'm not doing it from the back of a van with a gun to my head. I need protection, I need access, and I need help getting to the gala." He was quiet for a moment. "What gala?" "They'll hold one. They always do. These organizations, when they acquire something they believe is valuable, they formalize it. They'll want to display what they've taken, probably auction secondary rights, consolidate control in front of their partners. When they hold it, that's where we move." Tan Jun looked at her for a long time, not the brief, cataloguing glances she had grown accustomed to in the last few hours. And this was different. A full, considered silence, the kind that belongs to a man who does not make decisions without understanding exactly what he is deciding. "You're proposing a formal alliance," he said finally. "I'm proposing a transaction," she said. "You get what you've been working toward. I get my company back and my life. We both get the people who tried to make us collateral damage in their plans." Something moved in his expression. Not warmth, exactly. Not yet. But recognition. The particular recognition of someone who has been navigating a world of calculated interests for long enough to know the difference between a person who is afraid and a person who has decided. Julie James had decided. "Your encryption skills," he said. "How good are you?" She thought about the hotel security grid. The 90 seconds. The 80. Really. that had taken her to turn 3 armed men into a problem his people could handle with ease. She thought about the 4 years that had produced software sophisticated enough that a major criminal syndicate had decided it was worth framing and killing her to possess it. Good enough, she said, that they want to steal my work instead of building their own. He was quiet for one more moment. Then, the gala will require intelligence we don't have yet. It will require time and positioning and a level of precision that can't be rushed. I know. And your ex-boyfriend, he said, the word carrying no particular inflection, no offer of sympathy, simply a statement of tactical fact. He's still their asset. He knows your face, your habits, your network. He'll be a problem. I know that too. She tilted her head slightly. I also know him better than they do, which makes him useful, if we're careful. Tan Jun uncrossed his arms. He moved to the desk, unhurried, and stood beside her and looked at the screen still open on the forged documents. At her name, written in someone else's version of her hand, transferring away everything she had built. And she watched him look at it with the eyes of a man who had made a decision of his own. We begin in the morning, he said. We begin now, she said. He glanced at her sideways. She held the look. The silence stretched exactly long enough for her to understand that she had just negotiated with the most dangerous man in the city and walked out of it with everything she had come in asking for. Now, he agreed. And for the first time since the hallway, he sat down beside her. Outside, the city hummed with the ordinary noise of its ordinary night, entirely unaware that somewhere on the top floor of a luxury hotel it didn't know was owned by a man. It didn't know existed. A woman in a red dress and a crime boss in charcoal grey were about to begin taking everything apart. She sent the message at dawn. Not from her own phone. Tan Jun's people had already pulled the SIM and replaced it with something cleaner, something that would leave a trail precisely as long as they wanted it to be, and no longer. She sat at the desk with the grey light of early morning coming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and she composed the message the way she used to compose code. Every word load-bearing, nothing wasted, the whole structure designed to do exactly one thing. Marcus. I got away. I don't know who that man was or what's happening, but I'm scared, and I don't know who else to call. I need to see you. Please. She read it back once. It was good. It was, in fact, exactly the kind of message the Julie he thought he knew would send. Frightened, reaching for the familiar, still trusting the person who had already sold her. She had always been a good writer. She understood now that she had been wasting the skill on honesty. She hit send. His reply came in 11 minutes. She had expected longer, had expected him to consult whoever he was reporting to check whether the play was safe. And the speed of his response told her something she filed quietly away. He was eager. He wanted to believe she was still manageable. That eagerness was a vulnerability, and she intended to use every inch of it. Thank God. Are you hurt? Where are you? I'll come to you. She looked at the message for a moment. 2 years. She had spent 2 years learning the particular texture of this person, his habits, his rhythms, the specific way he constructed his sentences when he was performing concern versus when he actually felt it. And she could see the performance in every word of that reply with a clarity that would have broken something in her 24 hours ago. Now it just made her work faster. He's responding, she said. Tan Jun was behind her. He had been awake as long as she had. She wasn't sure, actually, if he had slept at all. And he moved through the penthouse in that unhurried, perpetually alert way of his that she was starting to understand was not tension, but readiness. There was a difference. Good, he said. I'm going to tell him I'm at the Meridian, across the district. Far enough that he'll need 40 minutes to get there. close enough that it's plausible. The tracker. She held up the device, small, flat, barely larger than a thumbnail, designed to look like nothing. In the spare phone I'm going to leave at the Meridian's front desk as a message for him. He picks it up. He carries it with him. Every meeting he takes, every location he visits, every conversation he walks into, we see it, in real time. Tan June looked at the device in her palm, then at her. And the false intel? I'm going to tell him I heard the man mention a name, Choi Seung-woo. She glanced back. Is that a real name in your network? Something moved at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, the suggestion of one. It is. A lieutenant. Low level. Expendable. Good. So, Marcus tells the Voss group that the man who interfered is Choi Seung-woo. They run the name. They find a real person. They waste time going in the wrong direction. It won't hold for long. Maybe 48 hours. But we don't need long. She felt him looking at her with that quality of attention that she had stopped finding unsettling somewhere around 2 o'clock in the morning. There was nothing predatory in it. It was the focused regard of someone who was genuinely, carefully watching a mind work. Send it, he said. She sent it. The reply she sent Marcus directed him to the Meridian. The spare phone was couriered across the district within the hour, the tracker sealed flat inside the case, invisible unless you were looking for it specifically and knew exactly what you were looking for. Marcus would not be looking. Marcus, she had come to understand, had never really looked at anything very carefully, had taken what was on the surface and been satisfied, which was, she supposed, how he had managed to sit across from her for 2 years without her ever seeing who he actually was. They had both, in their way, been guilty of not looking closely enough. She watched the tracker activate on the monitor when he picked up the phone. She watched the small blue dot that was Marcus begin to move through the city, heading away from the Meridian almost immediately. He hadn't even gone in, hadn't even checked. Heading instead toward a building in the financial district that Tan June's people had flagged 6 weeks ago as a known Voss Group front. She watched him walk straight to his handlers and tell them everything she had wanted him to tell them. He didn't even try to find me, she said. She meant it as an observation, a tactical note. It came out with a flatness that wasn't quite neutrality. Tan June said nothing for a moment. Then, no. Good, she said. It's easier when people are exactly what they appear to be. She closed the tracker window and moved on. The part of Tan June's world he showed her next was not the penthouse. She had understood, in the abstract, what he was. Had known from the moment he had pulled her away from room 412 that she was in the orbit of something that operated outside the boundaries of the world she had spent her life building carefully within. But understanding a thing in the abstract and standing inside it were different experiences, and he did not shelter her from the difference. And he took her to a warehouse in the Western Industrial Quarter on the second evening, in a car with blacked-out windows, with 2 of his men in the front seats who did not speak and did not turn around. The building from the outside was unremarkable, the kind of structure the city had dozens of, featureless and functional. But inside it was a different geography entirely. His people moved through it with the organized efficiency of a military unit that had been drilling the same procedures long enough that every movement was muscle memory. She counted 12 people in the first room alone, saw the maps on the tables, the equipment cases stacked with the kind of care that told her whatever was in them was expensive and precise. She saw other things too. She was not going to pretend she didn't. Tan June walked her through it without apology and without performance. He showed her what she needed to see because she needed to understand what she was partnered with, the actual weight and nature of it, not a softened version produced for the comfort of someone who might otherwise lose her nerve. She understood that this was, in its way, a form of respect. He was not managing her. He was informing her. Your people, she said, standing at the edge of a room where three of his men were reviewing floor plans she recognized as the Voss Group's financial district building. "How long have they been building toward this?" 2 years, he said. "What happened 2 years ago?" A pause. Brief, but she caught it. "Someone I was responsible for was killed, by the Voss Group, as a message." She looked at him. He was looking at the maps. His expression, what it always was. Contained, unreadable to most people, she suspected. Less unreadable to her now than it had been 48 hours ago. "I'm sorry," she said. He glanced at her. The glance lasted slightly longer than his glances usually did. "It was a long time ago," he said. "That's not actually an answer." The corner of his mouth moved. That not-quite smile she had seen twice now and was beginning to catalogue. "No," he said. "It isn't." They stood in the warehouse for another moment, side by side, looking at the maps of the building that had become the shared object of both of their intentions, and she was acutely aware of the proximity and of the fact that she was not uncomfortable with it, which was itself an interesting piece of information about where the last 48 hours had taken her. "When this is over," she said, "what does your life look like?" He considered the question with the same seriousness he gave everything. "Different," he said finally. "Different how?" He turned to look at her fully then, and there was something in the look that was neither the cold assessment of the first elevator ride nor the calibrated approval of the security grid hack. It was quieter than both of those, more deliberate. "I don't know yet," he said. "I haven't let myself think past the end of this." She held the look. "Neither have I." The warehouse hummed around them, full of the purposeful noise of people preparing for something that could not be undone once it began, and neither of them moved, and neither of them looked away, and the moment stretched to exactly the length it needed to be before she turned back to the maps and said, "Show me the Gala building's ventilation schematics. I want to know every path in and out." He exhaled, very quietly, barely audible, and turned back to the maps. "Here," he said. The Voss Group announced the gala through channels so encrypted that most of the city didn't know such channels existed. Tanjun's intelligence network had been monitoring them for months. The invitation arrived, by design, in the identity of a Taiwanese tech acquisitions consultant named Mia Lien, who did not exist until 72 hours ago when his people built her from the ground up. Corporate registration, transaction history, social footprint, references that would survive a cursory background check. The kind of person the Voss Group would invite to an event where they planned to auction secondary rights to stolen encryption technology to other criminals with money and ambition, and a need for sophisticated cover. The kind of person who would be expected to come alone, carry herself with authority, and not ask questions that weren't about price. Julie looked at herself in the mirror of the penthouse bathroom and adjusted the earring. Small, plain silver, nothing like the gold drops she had worn to the hotel. Everything different now. The identity as carefully constructed as the woman wearing it. And thought about the version of herself who had walked into this building 4 nights ago in a red dress, trusting and unprepared, carrying a keycard to a room that would have been her last. She had liked that woman. Had respected her work ethic, her belief in people, her genuine commitment to building something that mattered. She was still that woman. She had just added new rooms. She walked out of the bathroom. Tan June was standing by the window in a dark suit, different from the charcoal, this one black. The shirt beneath it black as well. The tattoos at his collar and hand the only variation in the silhouette. He was looking at his phone, but he looked up when she came in. And there was a pause that was brief enough to be deniable and long enough to be real. "Comms alive," he said. "My men are already positioned. 3 inside as catering staff. 8 outside covering every exit. 2 in the building across the street with sightlines to the main floor windows." The network access point? Third floor server room. Your window is 30 seconds from when you trigger the access to when their internal security will detect the intrusion. I need 20. You said 30 earlier. I was being conservative. 20 seconds to arm it. The full drain would take longer. But by the time their system recognized what was happening, nothing on Earth would be able to stop it. She picked up the small evening bag from the desk. Inside it, a device that looked like a compact mirror and contained 12 months of work in its circuitry, and met his eyes. I'll be fine. He looked at her for a moment. Something in his expression had shifted slightly from its usual precision, like a line of code with one variable changed. If at any point the situation changes, he began. I know. She held up the secondary piece she had built 2 nights ago. Small, clipped to the bracelet at her wrist, invisible unless you were looking for it. 2 clicks and you breach, yes? 2 clicks, he confirmed. She started for the door. Julie? She turned. He was still standing by the window, and he was looking at her with an expression she did not yet have full language for. Something measured and unguarded at the same time, which she was beginning to understand was the closest he came to open. When this is over, he said very evenly, finish the answer. She understood what he meant. The warehouse, the question, what does your life look like? She held the look for a moment. Yes, she said, and she left. The gala was held in a converted private gallery in the center of the city, the kind of building that announced its exclusivity through restraint. No signage, no visible security, nothing that would draw the attention of people who weren't meant to be there. Inside, it was deliberately beautiful. She had expected something colder, something that matched her image of the Voss Group's functional brutality, and instead found herself in a room that understood that the most dangerous environments were the ones that didn't look dangerous at all. Warm light, excellent wine that she did not drink. 40 or so guests who all wore the same expression of people accustomed to rooms where nothing was said directly and everything was understood precisely. She moved through the room the way Mia Lien would move through it, with the relaxed authority of someone who had been in many rooms like this and found them mildly interesting, but not impressive. She made 2 conversations. She asked 3 questions that were professionally calibrated to signal interest without revealing information. Smiled in exactly the right places. In her earpiece, Tan Jun's voice came quiet and close. North side. 2 of their senior people just arrived. She didn't alter her expression. I see them. The auction starts in 20 minutes. Server room access is on the 2nd floor, east corridor, 3rd door. I know. I memorized the schematics. A beat. I know you did. She moved toward the east corridor as naturally as someone moving toward the bathroom, stopped to exchange a brief professional pleasantry with a man whose name she didn't know and whose organization she intended to financially destroy within the hour, and then continued to the 2nd floor. The server room door required a keycard that she did not have. She had known she would not have it, and had planned accordingly, and the override device in her evening bag had the door open in 8 seconds, which was 4 seconds faster than she had estimated, which she found quietly satisfying. She was inside and working before the door had fully closed behind her. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a quiet clock was still running. 19 hours to Monday morning. 19 hours before the transfer completed with or without her. She did not look at the time. The Voss Group's financial architecture was familiar to her now. She had spent the better part of 3 days moving through it in preparation, learning its structure the way she learned any system, from the inside out, tracing every path until she understood not just where things were, but why they were there. She found the primary node in 45 seconds, attached the device, began the sequence. 20 seconds, 15, 10, 8, 5. 3, 2, 1. In her earpiece, a sharp intake of breath from one of Tanjun's men downstairs. Then, problem. She kept her hands moving. What kind? Your ex-boyfriend just walked in. Her hands did not stop. He wasn't on the guest list, she said. He's not a guest. He's with their security lead. Of course he is. Of course Marcus, having done one job, had been brought further in, the way these organizations always did, pulling people deeper to keep them compliant, to make sure they had too much to lose to become inconvenient. She thought about that for exactly the amount of time she could afford to think about it, which was none. He's moving toward the east corridor, the voice in her ear said. He may have made you on the door camera. It doesn't matter, she said. And then the sequence finished. She pulled the device from the node and put it back in the bag and walked out of the server room into the east corridor and came face to face with Marcus at the far end of it. And she watched his expression cycle through surprise and calculation and something that might have been guilt briefly, before it hardened into the particular blankness of a man who was committed to a course of action and decided to see it through. Julie? He said her name the same way he always had. She had once found that familiar. Now it told her nothing she didn't already know. How did you— It's done, she said. Not to Marcus, into the earpiece under her breath. Tanjun, it's done. Marcus's expression changed. He had heard the name. She watched him understand, in real time, the full geometry of what was happening. That she was not a frightened woman who had stumbled in looking for help. That the message from the Meridian had been exactly what it was. That the last 4 days had been a construction she had built specifically to lead to this moment. And she watched the understanding land on him with a weight she did not take pleasure in exactly, but did not flinch from either. You need to run, she told him, quietly, not unkindly. Whatever you decide to do in the next 60 seconds, it should be that. Then the lights in the gallery went out. What happened next took 11 minutes. She knew this because she counted, standing in the east corridor with her back against the wall while the controlled, tactical sound of Tanjun's operation filled the floors below her. Not chaos, nothing like chaos. The specific organized noise of people who had been preparing for this for a very long time and were now executing with the precision that preparation produces. She heard voices, commands, one short period of loud resistance that resolved quickly. She heard the gallery's emergency lighting kick on, casting everything in a low red glow that turned the beautiful room below into something that looked like the inside of a different story entirely. Her phone showed her the financial network in real time. She watched the sequence she had triggered propagate through the Voss Group's system like a current through water, account after account, shell company after shell company. Every financial instrument they had built their invisibility on suddenly becoming extraordinarily visible. Transfers reversed, balances drained, audit trails that had been carefully buried rising to the surface like something that had been held underwater and released. Every regulatory body on 3 continents would be looking at the same information before the sun came up. By the time Tanjun appeared at the stairwell door at the end of the corridor, the 11 minutes were over. He was unhurt. She looked for that first, before anything else, and registered the information with a steadiness that told her more about the last 4 days than she had fully admitted to herself. There was a cut above his left eyebrow that had not been there an hour ago and would leave a mark for a while, when he was moving with the same economy he always moved with. Nothing about his bearing suggesting that what had just happened downstairs had cost him anything he hadn't already priced in. He looked at her. It worked. Yes. All of it. All of it. She held up her phone so he could see the network cascade still propagating across the screen. By morning, the Voss Group won't have a financial structure to speak of. The transfer documents for my company will collapse when the shell company they're registered to collapses, which will happen. She checked the time. In approximately 4 hours. He looked at the screen, then at her. You're certain? I built the sequence myself. She put the phone away. I'm certain. A beat of quiet in the red-lit corridor. The senior leadership is contained downstairs, he said. My people will handle what comes next. She nodded. Marcus ran, he said. It wasn't a question. I told him to. He looked at her with that full, considered attention. Why? She thought about it for a moment. A real moment, not a deflection. Because what's going to happen to him without my intervention is worse than anything I could do to him on purpose. And because I didn't want to spend any more of tonight on him than I already have. Tanjun was quiet for a second. Then, to her complete surprise, that was merciful. It was efficient, she said. The not-quite smile appeared again, and this time it went slightly further than it usually did. She found Marcus herself. This had not been part of the plan, not discussed, not coordinated, nothing Tanjun had been told to expect. But she had always known she would do it, in the way that you know certain things, without deciding them consciously. She tracked the blue dot on the secondary phone to a parking structure 3 blocks from the gallery, where he had apparently decided that sitting in his car in the dark was a reasonable response to the collapse of everything he had aligned himself with. She knocked on the window. He unlocked the door. She didn't get in. She stood in the concrete grey of the parking structure and looked at him through the open window, and he looked back at her. And he had the specific appearance of a man who had recently understood the full dimensions of his own mistake. It's over, she said. The Voss Group's accounts are gone. The transfer documents are going to fail when the shell company that holds them ceases to exist in about 3.5 hours. My patents are mine. My company is mine. He said nothing. The legal exposure you're carrying right now is significant. I'm not going to help you with it. She said it without heat. I'm also not going to add to it. What you did was a choice you made, and what comes from it will be the consequence of that choice. And that's the entirety of what I have to say about it. Marcus looked at her for a long moment. She had once thought she knew every variation of his expression. She recognized this one. It was the face of someone who had expected anger, prepared for anger, built a defense against anger, and had no architecture whatsoever for simple, clear-eyed finality. Julie, don't. She said it gently. Not because she felt gentle, exactly, but because she was finished, and gentleness was the cleanest way to communicate that. I spent 4 years building something real. You spent 6 weeks selling it. There's nothing left to say that would be worth either of our time. She stepped back from the window. Find a good lawyer, she said, and she walked away. She didn't look back. She had always had very good instincts about which doors to close and which ones to leave open, and she was exercising them now, and the feeling of walking away from that parking structure in the cold, concrete grey dark of the evening was not triumph exactly, and not closure. Those words were too simple for what it actually was. It was more like the particular sensation of a system returning to its correct state after a long period of running, corrupted, a settling, a recalibration. She took the long way back. He was on the balcony when she arrived. The penthouse was quieter than it had been in 4 days, the monitors still glowing, but the urgent quality of the last 96 hours settled into something that felt, if not peaceful, then at least resolved. She found him outside, his jacket off for once, his forearms resting on the railing, looking out at the city with the particular quality of stillness that she had come to understand was not emptiness. It was the opposite of emptiness. It was the fullness of a man with a great deal behind his eyes and a habit of keeping it there. She stepped out beside him. The night air was cool and carried the low, constant undertone of a city that never fully stopped. It's done, she said. Yes, all of it. My legal team will file the IP confirmation in the morning. The Voss Group's financial collapse will be public by afternoon. Your people have what they need from tonight. 2 years of work. Finished? She stopped there. The transfer documents had died with Viridian Strategic Holdings at 3:47 that morning. Her patents were hers again. Had been, technically, for the last 4 hours. She hadn't let herself feel that until right now. He was quiet for a moment. 4 years, he said. If we're counting yours. She looked at him. We're counting mine. A small silence. Below them, the city moved through its ordinary night, entirely unchanged on the surface, the way cities always appeared on the surface, regardless of what had shifted in their depths. You asked me a question in the warehouse, she said. He turned to look at her. You asked what my life looks like, after. She had thought about how to say this, and had decided, in the end, that the way she said most things that mattered was directly. I don't know what it looks like. I knew what it was supposed to look like before 4 days ago. Launch the startup, scale the tech, change something in the world in a way that could be measured. That was the plan. And now? She considered the city for a moment. The plan is still the plan. The work is still the work. I just have a more accurate picture of the world the work exists in. She glanced at him. And different company. He held her gaze, and she held his, and the quiet between them was the kind that only exists between people who have been through something real together and come out the other side still standing. You said you hadn't let yourself think past the end of this, she said. Yes. So think past it. He was still for a moment. The city moved below them. The lights of it made something complicated of the night. My world is not simple, he said. It was not a warning. She understood that. It was the same thing he had given her in the warehouse, when he had shown her the maps and the men and the reality of his operations, without apology and without softening. Information, delivered honestly, to someone he had decided deserved honesty. I know that, she said. I've been inside your world for 4 days. I've seen the warehouse. I know what your people do and why they do it and what it costs. She paused. I'm not naive about it. No, he said. And there was something in the way he said it. Something that was not quite relief, but was adjacent to it. You're not. I'm also not simple, she said. I just took down a major criminal syndicate's financial infrastructure in 20 seconds from a server room in a stolen identity. I have opinions about how I spend my time and who I spend it with, and I'm capable of making those decisions without being managed. I know that too, he said. She turned to face him more fully, and he turned to face her. And the distance between them on the balcony was the same distance it had been for the last 4 days. Close enough to work together, respectful enough to be intentional about anything more. And she looked at him in the way she had been allowing herself to look at him since the warehouse, when she had stopped pretending that the thing developing between them was purely professional. I'm staying, she said. Not because I have nowhere else to go, because I want to see what comes next. All of it, whatever it is. She held his eyes. If that's a conversation you want to have. Tanjun looked at her for a long moment. The cold calculation she had seen in the hallway 4 days ago was still there. It was part of how he was built, she understood now. Not a pose, but a feature. But it sat alongside something else now. Something that had been developing in the spaces between their conversations, in the warehouse, in the server room corridor. In every moment, he had looked at her with that particular attention that had nothing to do with her usefulness and everything to do with who she was. It's a conversation I want to have, he said. She nodded, turned back to look at the city. He turned back with her. They stood together on the balcony in the cool of the night, and below them the city continued in its ordinary life. And somewhere in it, a criminal syndicate was collapsing in slow motion. And somewhere in it, a man was sitting alone in a parking structure with the wreckage of his choices. And somewhere in it, Julie James's life's work was quietly, securely returning to her. And she stood at the edge of it all, next to the most dangerous man she had ever met, and felt, for the first time in 4 days, something that was not dread, and not fury, and not the adrenaline of a problem being solved. She felt like herself, a new room of herself, one she intended to keep. Can Julie and Tan June outrun a syndicate that has already bought the one person she trusted most? And what else is Marcus still hiding about the night he signed her life away? Subscribe and turn on notifications because you do not want to miss what comes next. This story is only getting darker, sharper, and more dangerous from here. Drop a comment. Do you think their alliance can survive when the Voss Group's last move finally surfaces? Like this, if you are completely obsessed with this slow-burn collision between a brilliant tech founder and a mafia boss who sees exactly who she is. The next chapter drops soon, and trust me, you are not ready for what Julie finds buried inside that encrypted file. See you in the next one. If the woman in the red dress and the man who never planned to save her can survive what's coming for them both.